Call Winona Laduke.
Hello?
Winona,
Yes.
Kevin Shores.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm not good. How are you?
I'm all right. All right. Working along here. What's going on?
Well, I'm a little disgusted with your behavior.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Kevin.
Well, you're totally stealing my idea.
I'm not stealing your idea. I'm growing hemp.
Where did you
What's
come
your...
up with your idea, Winona?
Kevin, you don't own the idea to grow hemp.
Where did you come up with your idea, Winona? That's my question I have for you.
I came up with my idea not from you, Kevin. Thank you.
Where did you come up with it then?
Kevin, I am older and know more about a lot of things than you do. And
I'm asking you to stay specifically on the question that I asked. Where did you come up with your cannabis idea, Winona?
Not from you. I have a number
Where
of sources,
did you
and
come it up from it then?
I'm hanging up, Kevin. I'm not going to have you call and berate me.
I'm not berating you. I'm
Yes,
asking
you
you
are.
a question.
Thank you, my friend.
Not a problem.
All right, so Kevin, I want to just interview you about a little bit about you and you're running for office. Is that right?
Rolling for office.
You're rolling for office. That is right. All right, so let's just start off. So, Anine, this is Winona Laduke, our show Abba to Say, and I am visiting here with Kevin Shore.
Shores.
Kevin Shores, there's more than one shore.
Yes, it's plural.
Shores. Pleased to meet you again, Kevin. And I've known you a pretty long time, and you're quite an interesting fellow. And we're going to start with what you are doing right now, which is rolling. You're rolling for office?
Well, that chapter, I guess, just ended because the election was on the 5th of November, and I was rolling for the position of mayor of Moorhead. And it was my third time trying.
And so why did you run for this office?
Well, I've kind of been an activist most of my life. My name, NeSe for short, in Aanishinaabeg, means maker of loud noise. What I was told by Porky White, my Niijii, and it's kind of been my personality my whole life. I always spoke my mind, and sometimes at a strong cost. But I always kind of stuck up for the underdog and just wanted things to be better. I joked about wanting to save the world, and then when I had children, I realized I needed to save the world.
How I came to know you quite a long time ago, and I remember that you had just returned from the war. And so you're a Gulf War vet.
Well, no, actually, I'm a Kuwaiti oil crisis vet, and I met you at the Minneapolis. Well, I met you before, even before when you ran for office, or when you went for vice presidency with Ralph Nader.
I also have not won an election, okay? So I'm with you.
Right.
I'm with you, Kevin.
And I remember I did a ride. It was right after I did my ride across the state of Minnesota in my wheelchair that someone from the Nader campaign heard about it and wanted me to come and meet Ralph Nader and you. And I was like, I know Winona, and because we're from the same res, Well, I wasn't born there, but it's the res, and you know things on the res. And so I know of you, and I think we actually have met at powwows prior, but the one that I really remember is there at the Ralph Nader during the Minneapolis campaign stop you guys did.
So
And
that was 2000, I think, as that was. I don't know if we did one in 96, but I remember 2000 for sure. So when I called up to leave a message to interview you, what's that thing on your phone?
Cannabis Rezsolution?
Right. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. Okay?
Cannabis?
Yeah.
Right on. 3-year plan. Reservation, be billionaires.
So that was my idea.
What, cannabis?
Yeah.
I've been talking to you about cannabis since I've met you.
I was going to go for hemp to start.
Well, that's what,
Marijuana.
I was totally into the normal thing, and I was cool with using because I was never a big drinker, but I liked my cannabis. And then, I'm smoking cannabis, and then I'm like, well, what is up with this cannabis? And then I started researching cannabis, and I'm like, are you kidding me? The social aspect of cannabis is mute compared to the industrial aspect of it. And if the reservation, well, back in 2003, I gave the tribal council a PowerPoint presentation about growing cannabis, and I gave them my 3-year plan, and they're just like, huh?
Was that cannabis or was it industrial hemp?
I don't like going to the whole marijuana hemp thing because the word hemp is the Germanic word for cannabis.
Oh, but what's those pants you're wearing?
Cannabis. There's 300 strains of cannabis. Each strain can be cultivated to have a THC content, which is the thing that gets you high. However, if you want to grow it specifically for industrial uses, you don't let the bud mature. You cut the bud off and you make sure it's just growing specifically to harden the spine. It's that simple. Plus, if you're growing cannabis for medicinal aspect, you grow one plant with a 3 to 4 foot area around it. When you're growing industrial aspect, you have every 2 inches you're growing stalks. I have some images where it shows like the difference between growing, and the DEA, they can tell the difference between cooking poppy seeds and opium poppy seeds, but they can't tell the difference between growing for social use or medicinal use or growing for industrial use.
Do you have these conversations with them?
Yeah. I'm not a big advocate. I don't, I understand the medicinal usage and how it's becoming less criminal. It's becoming more.
You think it should be criminal?
No, like it's becoming
Less criminal.
less criminalized, and I think that's fine. Like it's going the way that, like I don't know, it could be hurried up, and tomorrow could be illegal. But I feel like, with my generation coming up, it's going to become legal in the next, I don't know.
If there's an
15
earth
years.
to legalize it in.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. It's becoming.
My claim is the moment Monsanto has the perfect cannabis seed, then it will be legalized.
Okay, we're interviewing about all this, okay?
Okay.
Because, aside from being a really smart guy, he has like some, we'll go with street cred on this. Because this guy has been through what he's been in. Whatever he wants to say, it's fine with, you know what I'm saying? It's like, because I know that that modern, whatever, that the meds that the VA gives someone, I know a lot of people who have medical marijuana.
Right.
I have a lot, because I travel around the country,
I do.
Yeah.
But I am the only veteran in the 5-state area that has been prescribed Marinol,
Can
which
you
is
say that on the radio?
Hell yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that then.
They'll probably take it away from me, but then it just strengthens my cause to just be growing my own and let the cops stormtrooper in on me and say, okay, arrest me. Arrest me as an Aanishinaabeg growing my medicine. You want to trample my First Amendment rights?
Well, I don't want
Let's
to.
do it. Well, even with the movie Reefer Madness that came out about the devil's weed, and look at the psychological implications on that movie where they showed all the supposedly cool kids were using marijuana, and the so-called like nerds and the socially awkward individuals were straight-laced, and so you didn't have fun unless you were using marijuana. But then they threw in that authoritarian and that doctor with the coat that you will go insane if you use the devil's weed or something of that.
Well, I don't know if that's true, actually. I don't know. I know that you could get dementia from a lot of things, and I heard the latest is, try to drink a glass of red wine a day, and it'll reduce your chance of dementia. They didn't say anything about don't take any marijuana, right?
Right.
I know, but not that many people do smoke. But this is kind of a perfect segue, and so thank you. You've saved me from trying to introduce this subject. I'm sitting here interviewing Kevin Shores, and he's wearing some hemp pants, but he corrected me and said that these are cannabis pants. Is that correct?
Right.
Is that a cannabis shirt too?
Correct.
Nice.
Actually, it's a blend, so it's not 100% cannabis.
Nice looking outfit. Is that illegal, your shirt and pants?
I guess if you tried to smoke it, it may be.
Yeah, but I mean, so there's this multi-million-dollar, I think it's probably in the billion-dollar hemp industry that is worldwide, because it turns out that hemp is like very versatile, from basically hemp seed oil. Hemp is a nutritional base. Hemp is what they made the sails out of for the, founding fathers and the Mayflower and the Santa Maria, and what was the other one, the Nina?
The USS Constitution had 25 tons of hemp, from ropes to sails to uniforms or to pitch on it. So the number right now, well, actually this is 3 years ago, 65,000 byproducts that can be made from the cannabis plant. Now, if you think about this, take a look around. Everything around us right now, as long as it's not glass or steel, can be made from the cellulose of the cannabis plant.
Okay, but this is something I've been obsessing on myself lately, because I am not a fan of the fossil fuels industry.
Not at all.
But everything that surrounds us is now a petroleum, quote, byproduct. And we've become people who are accustomed to that. Everything, they're sticking it in our body, right?
Right.
To park benches, to bags. And so the petroleum byproducts
Toys.
has become an essential thing. But a good portion of that could actually be made out of hemp.
Absolutely. With the Henry Ford actually had a fleet of 30 automobiles, personal cars, that were everything that could be made from cannabis was made from cannabis.
Really?
Yeah. And there's even an image where they show a gentleman striking the back trunk cover, and it bounces back, of how durable it is.
So they made a car out of hemp, basically.
Basically.
All right. So this is a very, very versatile plant. It is, and it grows in kind of a wide variety. I mean, I had the privilege of traveling down to Pine Ridge Reservation. I think those guys win the distinction of the poorest county in the country. I was neck and neck with Cheyenne River. And those guys, the White Plume family,
White Plume, yeah.
was growing industrial hemp.
Absolutely. Actually, that was one thing that spurred me on with my activism about cannabis, because I was paying attention to them and what they were doing. And I'm like, why is not the White Earth Reservation doing this? If you look at the history, the White Earth Reservation, 1867, it was called the Great Experiment, of where they were going to change us Indians into agrarians, or farmers. And all of these treaties and laws were made to help us become perfect farmers. Why are we not farming industrial cannabis?
Well, let alone food.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, the three basic hierarchies of food, clothing, and shelter can all be achieved from the industrialization of cannabis.
Okay, but I just want to say I'd like to have some squash. I'd like to have some corn.
Right.
I'd like to have some melons. You know, I'd like to have some beans besides just eating, because I have tasted that hemp bread, and it's not, you know, it's not like my cup of tea. I'd rather have some cornbread, but you go. It's very nutritious, right?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the nutritional value of it with all the delta 9 omega oils, you know, which is
Wait,
absolutely
you don't have to get it from fish krill?
exactly. And if you're not real, well, I'm not like my ancestors really fond of fish, and I think the military ruined that for me. But I remember catching sunfish out of DL with my grandfather Kermit, and actually I think he was the sunfish king of DL. But yeah, your delta 9 oils, you know, which are very, especially people that are diabetic, very important for maintaining optimal health.
Okay, and so there's industrial hemp to start with, which, you know, I mean, people always, you know, when you start talking about hemp, people say, well, that's marijuana, you can get high. And from what I get, you can, if you have to smoke like a whole bale of the stuff to get high. And by
Right.
then you would pretty much have passed out anyway, because the THC content is so low, right?
Correct. Well, and this is where I have the challenge, because if you look at the history of the decriminalization of cannabis, it was when all of these farmers were believing under good faith they were growing hemp. And then the government declared the Marijuana Tax Act. And I think the word marijuana is very derogatory. It was used to point out the minorities, you know, the Mexicans and the jazz players, the African Americans or the American Africans, whichever you choose. And, you know, how dare those minorities start looking at white women and facing up and looking white men in the eyes. And it was all because of the use of marijuana. So then they passed the Marijuana Tax Act, and then all of a sudden these farmers went to go renew their hemp farming bills. And when they came in, then they're like, oh, you can't grow that, that's marijuana. And it's like, since I've been growing this, it's been called hemp. Even George Washington, in his memoirs to his garden, he was, out of all my hemp, the Indian hemp, make sure you collect every seed.
So
And
he was selectively farming his...
right, and if you look at
This
the
is George
history,
W.,
George Washington, yes, and if you look at the history of Indian or India hemp, that was the hemp that was used in the hookahs.
Really?
Really.
Okay, so we're talking about hemp here. I'm talking to Kevin Shores, and so did you tell me that there's 300 and some strains?
Yeah, if I may humbly correct you, let's call it cannabis.
Okay.
I know you're really using the word hemp, and I apologize.
Okay,
but-
I'll move on. So is cannabis the technical name?
Well, cannabis is the Latin name for the plant, and there is roughly 300 different strains of the cannabis plant. And each plant can be cultivated to have THC in it, which is the pseudopsychoactive high, you know, the feeling of euphoria or the high. You know, basically people just call it the high. And THC, tetrahydrocanol cannabinol, I think is the full name of it. Well, you don't have to grow a cannabis plant to produce high THC. If you wanted to, you could, you know, but it would all depend on what you are going to grow the plant for. If you wanted to grow it for the social or medicinal aspect, you would plant one plant with a 3 to 4 foot area around it. If you're growing it industrially, and also with the plant for medicinal or social use, you would have to trim it because you want the plant to be big and fat and bushy so it creates the buds, the pollination buds. Now, if you're growing cannabis for industrial reasons, every 2-3 inches you plant a plant, and they grow to a height of 15 to 16 feet tall, and that pole or the stalk is where you get most of the material for the cellulose, and the inner core is what's used for the plastique or the plastic-like material.
Or the clothes that like you have on.
Right, the clothes, but unfortunately, right now China has the market on the clothes because they can produce it so quickly and so fast. So ideally, if you wanted to create some store or some production of the cannabis plant, your quickest is, of course, the seeds, because the seeds have all the nutritional value to it. You can make it for bird seeds, cooking, human consumption, the oils,
But it's possession of the seeds is illegal.
Right, right.
I mean, in the United States, not in Canada,
No,
right? But possession of hemp seed oil hand lotion is not.
right. Once it's been produced into a product, I think it's 30 tons or 30,
Bunch.
a bunch, a lot of product made from the cannabis plant is imported to the United States every year.
Oh, yeah, there's a huge amount because there's a big market here, but it is another thing that we don't grow domestically.
Right.
And we don't have a domestic hemp industry or a cannabis industry
And that
because
was
largely the DEA and actually the plastics industry, I think, has been pretty aggressive in trying to end run proposals.
Right.
It's been for many years, right?
Well, William Randolph Hearst was the first known vocal media mogul that started demonizing the cannabis. He was the one who helped produce Reefer Madness, and he had a bunch of newspapers where he printed all of these made-up stories of people going crazy and butchering their family on cannabis or marijuana, but
Isn't that meth? I think it's meth that does those things, right?
Right. But then, the wood paper mills. I think the ratio is 1 acre of cannabis would produce as much paper as 4 acres of trees. And that's a yearly thing. And the other aspect too is that cannabis will actually leach pollutants out of the soil when you grow cannabis in a plot. So you could leach out all the toxics from the petroleum-based fertilizers and the fertilizers and the nutrients that they put into the soil just to make it grow. So it would reintroduce the nutrients and leach out the pollutants.
That's what a cannabis plant could do.
Yes.
See, I totally did not know that. I mean, and so we're talking about this now. Some states, Oregon, medical marijuana use is legal, and I think growing up to 7 plants. Washington State has legalized marijuana, right?
Yep. There's 19 states in the country now that have medicinal, and North Dakota actually did legalize the growth of industrial cannabis, but the particulars of growing it is ridiculous. In order to have a profitable crop of cannabis, you're going to need acreage. And the DEA says, yeah, you can grow the industrial cannabis, but you have to have a 6 or an 8 foot fence around your field. It has to be lit or illuminated, lighting. Also, it has to have GPS on it and security. And, what farmer is going to have the fundings to build an 8 foot fence around a 100-acre field?
And have security.
Right.
That does sound a bit punitive, or just discouraging. We'll go with that.
Right.
So North Dakota has moved into it. I know some other states. Colorado is the most recent too, right?
Right.
And they have medicinal, plus they have cannabis or hemp itself, right?
Correct. Or no. North Dakota.
No, I'm talking about Colorado.
Oh, yes. Colorado does have the medicinal. Sorry. Colorado does have the medicinal, but I don't think they have. I think they're trying to get it on the ballot about the industrial hemp. And that's where I get so frustrated, because I think it should be just a straight across the board cannabis legalization. that they focus too much on this whole medicinal aspect that people forget about the industrial aspect.
Right. And I mean, I think it's certainly some of the historic demonizing has occurred, but I know that, so I know that the Pine Ridge Reservation and the Navajo Reservation both passed ordinances legalizing production of industrial hemp is what they did.
Right.
Not to split hairs on it. I think that those are the only two reservations I know, but there might have been some others. Do you know of any other reservations?
Well, I know at our reservation, of the White Earth Reservation, I did give the tribal council a presentation, I think it was 2004 or 2003, and gave them a 3-year plan of how we would be growing in the dough.
So you're suggesting that White Earth Reservation would legalize marijuana or legalize cannabis?
Cannabis across the board, and then have the simplest production can be hemp concrete or cannabis concrete. There we have our building, Maslow's hierarchy: food, shelter, clothing. So there's our buildings. You can also make a press board out of cannabis, where regular plywood has little 3-inch strands, where you could use 4 to 5 foot strands in a press board, making it 3 times as hard. Also, the cannabis board is a natural insecticide. Bugs don't like it.
Really?
Yeah. So those are the 2 simple things. Then you collect the seeds, and you can either use bird seed or food, or you can use it to get oil. You have the oil, you could take it and ferment the oil. There you have biofuels. So then you can grow your own fuel for your tractors to cultivate cannabis. So food, shelter, clothing.
And in this case, you're suggesting it because it would kind of be a niche market.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of the ththings I always find interesting is that tribal governments, there's a lot of things that they did to tribes historically. I mean, when they went and raided out on Pine Ridge and took the field from the White Plume family,
Right.
tore up their field, the DEA. I had interviewed Alex White Plume before, and he pointed out to me that the United States sent out the military, then let the bootleggers on the reservation. Let a lot of essentially pedophile priests onto the reservations, right? And then, then casinos. I mean, all of those were things that, are considered to be vices, right? And yet, you propose something like industrial hemp or cannabis, and that's considered to be illegal. And I was kind of like, so it seemed like the DEA turned its eyes through all that other stuff, or do you know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
But so I don't really understand why the federal government doesn't let tribes have an exemption for cannabis.
Well, this goes back to the whole thing of us supposedly being a ward of the country.
That's why you and I are wards of the federal government. I always forget I'm a ward.
Right, and so we are not right in our minds to make, the right decisions on what to do with our land and our entity.
Right, we're not competent.
Right.
We're wards of the federal government, trustees, yeah. Just for those listening in, this is Winona Laduke, and I'm interviewing with Kevin Shores here, and we're just talking about that we're both wards of the federal government. And I wake up every day and I say, oh, that's right, I'm not competent. What's the federal government want me to do?
Right, and even though you've been educated at Harvard, that you're not competent enough to make decisions.
Yeah, well, if I was competent, I'd say we should go for cannabis. Industrial hemp and the whole works, because it's a huge market, and whether it's for the seeds that you have for your community, the seeds that you have for with this high nutritional value to all the products. I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar, I'm thinking in the billions of dollar industries that we don't have.
Well, even I think it was 1954, Popular Mechanics did a front page story on hemp. And if you look at the etymology of the word hemp, it's a Germanic word for the Latin cannabis. So they're really good at the wordplay, the doublespeak.
Yeah, I know that. like thermal enhancement. That's what it's called when a nuclear reactor discharges a bunch of hot water into a river. That's only thermal enhancement is only really good if you're like in a hot tub or in a geothermal hot spring, not when a nuclear power plant discharges it.
Or if you have some naboop on the stove.
Yeah, or something. Heat up your soup. Naboob. Heat up your soup. Right, exactly. But yeah, okay. I don't want to sidetrack. But the other thing I just want to say is that I don't know what percentage of the under 25 related arrests on White Earth, but a good percentage of those are marijuana related.
Oh, absolutely. And if you think of the cost for these non-hurtful crimes, you know, that it's ridiculous. And that's one of the biggest challenges too with the whole legalization of cannabis. You know, what do we do with these prison corporations? You know, are they going to go out of business because 60% of their population is going to have to be released?
60% of the population is in there for drug-related offenses? A chunk, though.
A chunk. I wouldn't say, you know,
But a lot.
specifically a lot.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot, you know, and we should look into that, but I know that there's quite a few. But, you know, let's just get back to, you know, so this is a proposal that you're talking about. And Kevin, you said you proposed this to the tribal government a few years ago.
I think it was 2003.
Interesting.
PowerPoint
that'd be
presentation.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
But who's keeping track?
right.
And but also there's the whole medical use of it. And I know that I had a father who passed away from cancer, and he was in a state in Oregon where it was legal, but he did not choose to. But I thought, you know, if you're sick and that helps your pain, you know, the use of medical marijuana, you know, it has a lot of health benefits.
Well, my history, my own example is that when I was sick, I was using cannabis when I first was diagnosed with my rheumatoid variant disease. And I was using cannabis medicinally to maintain my pain management. And unbeknownst to me, I was given a urinalysis, and the THC showed
up.
The THC showed up in the urinalysis, and then they made a big deal about it and threatened me that I couldn't use it, and so I stopped using it. But all of this time, they were perfectly fine with me supporting the war with my OxyContin use, you know, because we have to keep that opium flow. What is the opium trade? 800% greater since the last war. And so I think they call it hillbilly heroin. You know, they're fine with me taking those, which is damaging to my liver and my kidneys, yet they're not okay with me using cannabis to manage my pain.
That's a bit perplexing, I would say.
But
Particularly,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, particularly because they don't really. It seems like that VA didn't really have a solution to your problem.
Right, and I mean, on the good side, I guess, I mean, for 12 years plus, I've been asking the VA if I can have medicinal cannabis, and they've constantly said no. I've even had doctors, you know, doctors from India, mind you, tell me, why would you want such a thing? And I guess he didn't know about the god Shiva bringing cannabis down from the mountain for the people of India. But recently, I've been prescribed Marinol, which is a synthetic THC, which is synthesized, so it's probably petroleum-based, but it's a synthesized THC, which is the tetrahydronol cannabinol from cannabis. So
The active thing.
the active ingredients, right, that is used for pain management.
And does that help you?
Yes.
Well, that is good to hear. I mean, because I appreciate, you know, I appreciate the good path that you've taken in life, the good work you've done, and it's a sorrowful thing to have someone in a tough spot because of the military, you know. And then if there's something that helps you, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing.
Right. Well, I've never been the one to let my challenges stop me. I like to use the word challenge instead of problems, because problems kind of have like a negative connotation to it right away. And so if you look at it as a challenge, a challenge is something that can be overcome, and if you're not able to do it alone, then, you ask for help, and that's never been a challenge for me to ask for help, because I know I'm a humane being, and I like to believe that there's more humane beings around that are willing to give of themselves. And this goes back to the teaching of our ancestors,
Yeah.
of giving of ourselves.
Minopamadaziman.
The
good life.
Right.
Good life. Well, Kevin, I think our time is coming to a close here, and you got any other, there's so many things we could talk about, but I just want to give you a couple more moments here to share with our listenership on White Earth. We've talked about everything from the Gulf War to mayoral runs to being a good human to medicinal use of cannabis and cannabis in general as an economic development strategy, and yeah.
Well, I'd like to at some time maybe do a whole show on cannabis, because I even have a solution to the clouded land titles on the reservation with the industrialization of cannabis. But as far as, for the audience that's out there and knowing where Niijii Radio, puts out with all the power that they can, and if people can help donate to Niijii Radio so they can boost that power, and even hopefully more people can learn of these shows and the lessons taught. But as far as the audience out there, many different tones of skin, many different pigment challenges, and upbringings of differentness, and religions out there. But no matter what religion or color or even sexuality that we are still on this Mother Earth or the world. And as a humane being, we need to be humane with each other. And so I think that if we could at least, in the least, respect each other, just respect each other in everything, which is the teaching of the Aanishinaabeg people. How can you go wrong if you respect everyone and everything? And if you're able to sprinkle a little bit of love on that respect, more power to you. So that's pretty much my biggest lesson, respect.
Well, miigwech miu. Thank you.
Chi miigwech.
Yeah, thank you for visiting with me here on this getting to be cold day. Gosh, God no Jesus in November. Miigwech. Because I appreciate, I appreciate the good path that you've taken in life, the good work you've done, and it's a sorrowful thing to have someone in a tough spot because of the military, and then if there's something that helps you, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing.
Right. Well, I've never been the one to let my challenges stop me. I like to use the word challenge instead of problems, because problems kind of have like a negative connotation to it right away. And so if you look at it as a challenge, a challenge is something that can be overcome, and if you're not able to do it alone, then, you ask for help, and that's never been a challenge for me to ask for help, because I know I'm a humane being, and I like to believe that there's more humane beings around that are willing to give of themselves. And this goes back to the teaching of our ancestors,
Yeah.
of giving of ourselves.
Minopamadaziman.
The
good life.
Right.
Good life. Hey, I'm gonna roll. But Kevin, I just really want to thank you for visiting with me. I hate to interview you and run, but you
Right.
have your company now, and then I have to go collect my own children.
Right. Well, let's talk about getting this industrial cannabis going.
I would love to. This was always what I thought too. But I probably just got the idea from you.
I wouldn't make that claim.
So, of course, I just thought gay marriage and industrial cannabis, and we'd be set, man. We could make a lot of money.
Right?
Tribal gay marriages, come on. Totally marketable.
Yeah, if you could have like a little chapel built.
Yeah. No, just have a teepee up there. Come, Shooks.
Gigawabaman.
You woman. And actually the expert on this is Kevin. He's far more knowledgeable about the hemp ordinances. We just did some present research on the legal standing right now. All right, so basically, and Kevin could probably talk far more articulate about this, but basically I think that the tribe should look at an ordinance first on industrial hemp. Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about hemp and your thinking on it? And then I thought that you should look at it, and then I thought my strategy was to maybe do a couple of public forums on it so that people understood it, and have Kevin present.
Where's Kevin from?
He's here. He's a tribal member here.
Here? Oh,
If I may, Bourgeois Nin, NeSe Widang Indigo Ojibwem, Gawababi Ganikag, and Dunjiba, my family, Moorhead, Nungum, Inde, Chimigwich, for the opportunity to speak before you. In 2003, I gave a 2-hour presentation to the Tribal Council when Irma first became part of the Tribal Council. I don't know if you recall that, Irma.
I do. You brought all kinds of products.
Correct. And at that time, I told the Tribal Council that I had a 7-year plan to have the reservation completely self-sufficient without any reliance on the federal or state government, where we would take the money that the state and federal government owes us and use it strictly for health of the nation, of the people. Within 3 years, we could have a business up and running as far as fabricating one of the byproducts. With the cannabis plant, there's over 65,000 byproducts that could be made. This means that each tribal member could select one thing of his favorite thing, and they would corner the market on that. Anything around you that you can see right now, if it's not made out of glass or metal, can be made from the cannabis cellulose. Also, with the crop rotation, that it can be used with the regular farmers when fields, if any of you are agrarians or farmers, you know that you have to do a crop rotation where the field has to just settle and replenish itself. The cannabis plant actually takes out harmful products or harmful additives, preservatives. Within 3 years, it can turn a field into an organic field by leaching out all of the toxins and heavy metals, and those could be harvested and used for concrete, because you can make cannabis concrete. They found a bridge in France 700 years old, and they didn't know how it's been standing for so long. And when they did a sample of it, they couldn't figure out what kind of stone it was, and it was a botanist that saw the structure of it and said, that's plant material. And then they realized that it was the cannabis plant. The word hemp is the Germanic, Aramaic word for cannabis. The Latin classification is cannabis. Marijuana and hemp are of the cannabis species, or the top branch, I guess you could say. There's 300 different strands of cannabis plant. The most commonly used is the cannabis sativa and indica and the rumella. The rumella plant is the one that is used because it's easily manipulated to have a really low THC, so it can circumvent the whole DEA regulations. However, if you look up George Washington in his writings with his gardener, he said select every single seed from the Indian hemp seed, the Indian hemp. So of course he's not referring to us, he's referring to the Indians of India. And from India came indica. And indica was prevalently known for smoking, the medicinal aspect and the social use. So George Washington was telling his gardener to make sure that you keep the seeds that we use for smoking. And this is in his memoirs to his garden. But they also used industrial cannabis to use for paying off their taxes and stuff like that. World War II, when the hemp trade was blocked off in Indonesia, they had a war effort to grow in the United States, where they had farms growing industrial cannabis. It's absolutely ridiculous that we as our people with our sovereignty are not growing industrial cannabis. In 1867, the White Earth Reservation was called the Great Experiment, where it was the quintessential point of taking the Aanishinaabeg people and turning them into agrarian farmers. And so all the treaties were strictly written to assist us to becoming farmers. And so we should become farmers by growing industrial cannabis. We could take care of the clouded title issues with industrial cannabis, where all of the farms here or all the property that has issues with clouded titles, we can say your family can stay here and farm for the rest of their life as long as you're farming industrial cannabis for the reservation. And when you want to leave the reservation, we'll buy your farm. It's endless, the potentials. I have been with the cannabis issue for 30 years. And actually I'm really, really frustrated, you know, that I hear rumblings on the reservation where people are talking about bringing cannabis to the reservation. And you guys can imagine my frustration when 10 years ago, we could have already been independent at this point, or well on our way. You know, and we gotta break free. And just the medicinal aspect or the medicinal social aspect of the cannabis, it has been proven in these states and these that are doing the legalization of the medicinal social use of cannabis, that they're having a decrease of crystal meth use, heroin use, alcoholism. It can be used as a tool to get people off of the addictive, harmful synthetic chemicals. Right now, I am the only veteran in the 5-state area that is given synthetic cannabis to use for pain management after 15 years of fighting with the VA system. So a federal recognized doctor told me I can use medicinal, fake, synthetic THC, but I can't come home to the reservation and grow natural when our treaties say that I can use our land to grow my medicine. And so I think we're at a quintessential, pivotal point that we need to be ready by this spring that we're planting. But I can go on for hours, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I'm very passionate about this.
I'm gonna turn this off now. I just turned it off to tape him.
No problem.
I mean, unless can I tape it or what?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Let's just leave this part.
But one of the pieces that we're really looking at is, to me, and this is for me personally, and we haven't had a larger discussion about it really anywhere, is that we receive federal funding, you know, and once we receive those grants, we sign off that we're a drug-free workplace.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a federal law. You know, it's still illegal at the federal
that's
level.
true.
And so, because at first I was thinking, what are we going to do if somebody comes in with a script for medical marijuana and they're not passing our UAs? You know, is this something we need to look at? But then going back to where the primary of our funding is coming from, we can't discern 100% of the time that this is 100% federal funding, this is state funding, this is private, this is casino generating. So we're still going to have overall that rule. But I do really like what you put together, and that we are going to be moving forward with it.
You know, this is kind of the background, like I said, and it's not a drug.
This is the synthetic THC that they give me, and they did this. Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the way that they set it up, they did this purposely, and you can call it conspiracy if you'd like. But when they legalized cannabis to be used medicinally, the pharmaceuticals stepped back to watch how the common layman is going to deal with it. And now that they started getting all the kinks out, Minnesota came in with this pharmaceutical law where they said that cannabis can only be distributed as a pill. That totally kills the small businessman, and it gives all the power to the pharmaceutical corporations. And this is the other reason why we need to jump on this right away. Because if we could become the country, if we could get all the reservations on each state to be the distributors of medicinal cannabis.
I know that one of those tribes out in Washington State is looking at this, because Washington State just legalized it, and they're looking at kind of like the tobacco shop idea. You know what I'm saying, for cannabis.
You can open that up and
Cannabis.
look at it. That's fine if you
I
want.
just wanna smell it. No, just.
You can't. I mean,
Or does it smell like anything? They're so processed, you know?
do you guys understand the differences between the hemp and the marijuana?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it is the same plant, but it's just grown differently. It's just like Carver when he was developing his tomato plants and that. They just crossbred them.
Is that fiber? Yeah.
But if you guys want to see the other stuff too, let me know anytime.
I think we're okay, thank you though.
Oh, I've been around the res long enough to know.
Have you thought about decriminalizing?
Yeah, we haven't talked about it, Winona.
I think, for us, I think that would be a bigger conversation as far as, you know, because one of the big issues that this ties back into is, doesn't matter how I feel about marijuana, it ties back into our hiring policies. And for us, we're always looking to hire tribal members. And if we legalize it on one side, but then not hire for it on the other, we're trying to maintain it within our employment, I think that would be an impossible nightmare.
Well, what percentage of people on this reservation smoke? Someone told me 40%.
I probably believe it.
Yeah,
I bet it's more than
I had no
that.
idea, like living in my little bubble, I was like, really? You know, but not all those people are tribal employees.
No.
And if you, and you reduced it so it wasn't a criminal offense, or, you know what I'm saying, is like, even if they could grow in their own house. Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, because they'd still have to, I totally get what you're saying about the federal law.
Well, this is where they're having a challenge with me right now at the VA because they want me to sign a drug waiver saying that I'm not going to use any drugs. But according to them, they prescribed me the drug. And so it's a loophole with the VA, and they don't know how to address it.
Which VA?
Up
Kevin?
in Fargo.
Oh, okay.
Good job, man. Sorry I had to inundate with pipelines.
Oh, that's fine.
A good start. So do you, well, we'll see when we can get some forums set up, because that's what we talked about, right?
Right. Yeah, I still have my presentation and all that stuff, so I've been ready.
Okay, well, we didn't do nothing on it yet because I've been working on the pipelines, but
Right.
let's see if we could, how we can do some,
This is Kevin. He was